Hey friends, this is Carrie and welcome back to I Like Reddit channel. Today we have 3 stories out of some different subreddits. It's almost like we have a revenge sandwich, starting with Prorevenge, then we have Tales from Retail in the center, closing up the sandwich with Petty Revenge. Let's begin. Our first story is by Ghost of SarovG. An apprentice engineer pisses off the crew, gets left behind 250 miles away from home. Some years ago, I got a gig working a weekend music festival. Fairly simple too. 10 bands per day, all pretty standard rock and roll fare. Boss man puts 4 of us out on the gig. Me, Dreadful Boris, Big Chris, and Hammer. Also, he said that we would be taking out an apprentice, a young lad who was the son of the local promoter. Well, always nice to have an extra pair of hands, and good help training the next generation. After all, that's how we all learned. As it turns out, this lad was about as much use as an aqualung to a trout. He had an entitled attitude and the size of a mid-range African country. On the journey down, in the truck, he was boasting about how he was a really good sound engineer. Already that he probably could show us a few tricks. Oh, really? We get down to the venue and get busy unloading the truck. We've got a 16-tonner stuffed to the gills with 2 sound desks and about 16 kilowatts of sound gear for the front of house and about 6 kilowatts of monitors. As you might imagine, this is pretty heavy stuff and it takes all of us to safely unload it and get it stacked up into place. Except that after unloading the first amp rack, all on wheels but still around 80 kilos, the entitled brat snottily announces, "I'm a sound engineer, not a humper," and promptly strolled off. Okay. Well, we don't really need him gumming up the works. We're well used to slinging boxes around. So about an hour later, we've got the rig stacked up and strapped down. Run out the multi-core to the front of house desk, and we're ready to start cabling up and tying power into the on-site generator. Out of nowhere, Snotty Brat emerges from whatever hole he had buried himself in and asks what he can do. I say, I'm going to plug up the front of house and perhaps you could help Hammer cable up the speakers. I don't take orders from girls. Quick side note here. Hammer was 5'9", drop-dead gorgeous, and as hard as nails, hence the nickname. She was also a damn fine front-of-house engineer and a bloody good mate. Boris, Chris, and I collectively groaned inward and winced in anticipation of a full 16-inch broadside from Hammer. Seriously, folks, you do not want to screw with her unless you want your family jewels dangling from the nearest tree. Instead, she smiles sweetly, never a good sign, and says, "Well, I'm sure you'll learn something useful." I then go off and play with the cables for the front of house, while Boris and Chris busy themselves with the monitors. A while later, I'm back on stage. Snotty Brat has wandered off again. Hammer has a resigned look on her face. What happened, I ask. Turns out that despite cables and connector ports being well labeled, the Snotty Brat had managed to make a complete pig's ear of plugged up the amp racks. Trust me, it's very hard to make this kind of mistake. I found Snotty Brat some moments later and told him that if he was not sure the proper way of doing things, then he needed to ask somebody beforehand. What came out of his mouth absolutely floored me. I don't need to know any of this stuff. I'm a sound engineer. Blink. Hammer, who was standing a few feet away, snorted derisively and rolled her eyes heavenwards. It took me a few seconds to process this particular nugget of stupidity. Well, you have to know how this works. It's part and parcel of the job. As you're here to learn, I suggest you pay attention. Well, you're just a bunch of roadies. What do you know? Upon delivering this charming bon mot, he ambles off again, leaving me to retrieve my jaw from the desk and Hammer barely able to restrain a fit of laughter that would have incapacitated a rhino. At a guess, this idiot thought he was going to be white-gloving the front of house for the whole gig. An hour or so later, we're all set up, and we now have a fair idea of all the acts that are going to be performing. In situations like this, you rarely get an opportunity to do a full-blown sound check, so you have to rely on experience to set the desk up from the cold. Luckily, we got the first act on stage a half hour before the show kicks off, so I could quickly get a rough sense of the overall setup. A bit of exposition. It's convenient to reuse channels across acts, so I generally keep the first 20 or so channels for drums, bass, and guitar, and the last half dozen or so channels for vocals. If the band comes in with anything else, percussions, brass, or Tibetan nose flute, etc., we whack them on channels in the middle, keeping things nice and simple and consistent across the board, and becomes important in a moment. The working procedure in show is also simple. Dreadful Boris and Big Chris run the monitor desk, and Hammer and I run the front of house. We'll do acts each before and handing over to each other. Saves wear and tear on our ears. And when we're not running the desk, we'll handle setting up stage for each act and troubleshooting when necessary, as well as doing runs for food and coffee in between. We also tasked Snotty Brat with helping with the stage setup, which rapidly proved problematic. We finished the first act and aimed to do the turnover within 15 minutes. Generally, the incoming act will tell us their mic requirements and will write up a mic plot, which then gets sent up to the front of house desk. Up comes Snotty Brat with the mic plot, and he goes back to help with the stage setup. As I'm checking each mic, I notice that I cannot hear the vocal channels. No sooner had I plotted this than Dreadful Boris comes on the intercom and asks if I can hear the vocal channels. He couldn't hear them either. He then goes off to check the stage box where all the mics are plugged into. From all the way out front, I hear him shout, "F me!" Seconds later, he's back on the cans. "Do you know what that fecking idiot has done? Only repatched all the vocal channels so that they're all plugged in on the stage box, are all lined up neatly, one after the other," his words. Ye God. Boris rapidly repatches the mics and we're good to go again. After a few hours later, I'm starting my second shift out front. I won't bore you with my experience of riding herd on Snotty Brat on stage shift, which, shall we say, was interesting. Currently on stage is a rather nice jazz septet. I love doing jazz. Give me some nice 20-piece big band and I'm a happy bunny. Strolls up he who shall not be mentioned and asked, "When can I have a go at mixing? I'm really good, you know." Seeing as he's here to learn, I tell him he can take the next act under my supervision. This happened to be an acoustic duo, 2 guitars, 2 vocals. Even the most tyro engineer should be able to handle something so simple, right? Wrong! I've already set what I regarded as a sensible baseline on the faders for him to work with. First thing he does, he reaches for the master faders and cranks in another 15 decibels. No! I immediately rig the tethers on the edges of the feedback and I rapidly pull the mains back. Look and listen. Balance out the vocals, then the guitars. Leave the mains alone. He starts making wildly inappropriate changes to the channel's EQ. Again, the rig starts to squeak. Okay, enough. I shove him out of the way and bring it back under control. I won't fatigue you further with the endless catalog of foul-ups and attitude that he managed to effect over the rest of the weekend. Suffice to say that despite the best effort of myself and Hammer trying to teach this guy, they all went to naught. Couple this with the constant drip, drip, drip of snide commentary about how he was a really better engineer than the rest of us. By the end of the weekend, we're pretty fed up with him. Come to the end of the event, and it's now the fun part of striking the rig and loading out. I'm being sarcastic about the fun part, by the way. 2 solid days, we're all knackered, and the last thing we want to be doing is packing up, of course. But it has to be done. It's always a all-hands-on-deck situation, except Snotty Brat has once again vanished into the woodworks. 2 back-breaking hours later, and we're all done. The truck is loaded up, and we're ready to go home. So where's Snotty Brat? Nowhere to be found. We give it a good 15 minutes, but no joy. We then decided to go looking for him, so that we spent another 20 minutes trolling around the site trying to find him. Again, he's done a disappearing act. We get back to the truck. It's now close to 3 a.m. Almost simultaneously, we all say, F him. We climb back aboard and drive 250 miles back to the warehouse to unload. The next afternoon, the boss man calls me to find out why we left Snotty Brat behind. I gave him the Cliff Notes version and was told that snotty brat had called his father at 3 in the morning to come and get him a 500-mile round trip. He then said, "I never liked this promoter anyway. He's always late and paying the bill on previous gigs. Next time he calls wanting a rig and a crew, I think I'm gonna tell him F off." Wow, that sounds like one hellish experience, having to deal with that kid. And I can't say I blame the OP and his crew for doing that. I mean, heck, I probably wouldn't have went and looked for him and just left, because that's what the kid deserved. Anyway, on to our next story. Our next story is posted by Lady Terrorbird. "Ma'am, that register's closed. Standing there won't make it work. This happened years ago, but the leap of logic people make still amazes me. During my stint at a store where everything costs $1, I was just getting ready to leave for the day. I was almost done ringing out the people in my line when a lady walked up with a full cart. She took one look at my line, my coworker's line, and proceeded to the register behind me. A register that had no till, drawer was clearly open and empty, and all the lights turned off, and a closed sign in front of it. Me notices this lady starting to put her stuff on the belt. Ma'am, that register's closed. Lady ignores me as she continues to pile her mountain of items on the belt. Me, ma'am, there's no one to ring you out. That register is closed. Lady turns to glare at me. It will be open. Goes back to putting her stuff on the belt. Me, ... Finishes and calls my manager. My manager comes to grab me and we go to the office to count out my till. Manager, is that lady waiting for someone? Me, she wants to be rung out. Manager, then why is she standing at a closed till? Me, I told her it was closed, but she won't move. Manager, after a thought, she can wait there. I'm not going to open another till just for her. So we count my till out, which takes about 10 minutes, sign the proper paperwork, and I head back to grab my stuff. All of this took about 10 to 15 minutes. Guess who's still waiting up front, standing at an empty register? The lady gave me a hard glare as I walked out to enjoy the rest of my day, while she continued to wait for a cashier that was never going to show up. The next time I came in to work, apparently the lady got so fed up with waiting, she left the store with all of her stuff on the belt. I don't know, for some reason this feels like it should be in the entitled people category, just because I think this woman felt like she was entitled to have a register open just for her because she needed a register open just for her. But I guess she didn't know that that's not the way businesses typically work. Anyway, on to our final story. Our final story is posted by Shaleka. Sent a new neighbor to the police station for a few hours. We live in an apartment block, and occasionally we have new people move in and out. Yesterday we encountered a new resident, a short red-haired lady who, through dwarfism and food, managed to be about as wide as she is tall. My boyfriend greeted her with a simple hello, and he tried to say welcome, but she cut him off with, "Shut up, I don't know you." Okay, not the social type. Neither are we. Let's not get friendly then. Today, when I returned from grocery shopping, we found her trying to pick the lock with what looks like a piece of a paper clip, because, you know, that's going to work. And she apparently had been at it for some time, because we could open the door with our key, and a patrol car stopped, and the officer called out to her. We stopped to watch because, well, it was happening. The officer asked her why she was breaking in, to which she responded that she lived here. She turned to us and said, "They know me." My boyfriend smiled and said, "I don't know you." We entered the building after the officer asked us to confirm, and my boyfriend repeated, "We don't know her. Can't wait to have contact with her again." Was a little confused as to why she was trying to pick the lock. I mean, if she has a key, wouldn't it just been better if she just used the key to open the door? Anyway, that's all the stories I have today. Please stop on by Reddit to show the OP some love and an upvote. Links to the original stories will be in the description box below. If you enjoy my content, please like and subscribe to my channel. Don't forget to hit the bell notification to let you know when I've uploaded new content. Thank you for watching and have a great day.